Kingdom Come by Elliot S. Maggin, book review. So this was originally a comic book by DC Comics. I believe it came out in 1996. I'm actually not reviewing the comic book. In fact, I've never actually read the original comic book. I think the comic book was published in 4 series, maybe, as a mini-series. It's more famous for being collected in a graphic novel and kind of sold and consumed at that level. But there was also a novelization of the story by Elliot S. Maggin. And that's the version I read, and that's the version I'm reviewing. So this is a DC comic book story, so it features the usual superheroes, you know, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. But this is part of the Elseworlds series. Now, the Elseworlds series, if you're not familiar, this is kind of DC comic stories that take place outside of their regular continuity. I think Marvel has the same thing, but they call it Marvel What Ifs. So they're kind of taking the same characters and just kind of playing what-if games with it that don't affect regular continuity. Kind of, although actually, because of the extreme popularity of Kingdom Come, some of these ideas have retroactively been added into the usual continuity, ideas like Red Robin and something like that. And then I think with the rebirth of the multiverse, there's been some attempt to integrate this into regular continuity, I think. I don't really know. I'm not going to deal with that this time. I'm just going to talk about the actual story itself. So this story takes place about 30 years in the future. During that time, most of the superheroes are in semi-retirement. And a younger generation of superheroes and superpowered humans are now running rampant around the world. There's an apocalyptic disaster which occurs and, wipes out a sizable chunk of population. After which, most of the old superheroes come out of retirement to try and bring law and order onto the world and rein in their younger descendants. Then they end up splitting up into various factions. Superman and Wonder Woman form one faction, which is dedicated to trying to bring the younger generation into justice. Meanwhile, Batman, Green Arrow, and some of the others form another faction that believes that Superman's faction is sliding towards fascism, kind of resisting Superman's attempt of law and order. And meanwhile, Lex Luthor and his team of villains are trying to manipulate events. Also, somehow Luthor has managed to brainwash Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel is now under Luthor's control. As you can maybe see from that description, this is a pretty complex story, especially like for a superhero comic book story. There's a lot of plot elements in here. But the main conflict between Batman and Superman seems a little bit forced. This is a common problem in superhero stories. So in a lot of superhero stories, you have like 2 superheroes who end up fighting each other. For who knows what reason. The kids like seeing it, I guess. So it's kind of a tradition in superhero comics. Now, because usually the superheroes are both good guys, you need to manufacture some reason for them to fight. In normal comic books, this will often take the form of kind of mistaken identity or some sort of misunderstanding, or one or the other of them will be under mind control, and that's why they have to fight. Here's a political argument, which is a bit more interesting than the usual cases of mistaken identity. But it still feels a little bit forced. At times it seems like Superman and Batman are just deliberately misunderstanding each other, just so that the writers will have an excuse for conflict. Superman and Captain Marvel also battle it out. Of course, if you know anything about comic book history, you know that Superman and Captain Marvel fighting each other is kind of an inside running joke. The reason being, Captain Marvel originally started off as a Superman ripoff by a rival company before it ended up getting bought by DC years later. So that's why in the comic books they're always kind of shown fighting each other as kind of an homage to the legal battle between DC Comics and Fawcett Comics. Now, in addition to all these superheroes fighting, there's a lot of religious imagery in this story. Specifically, there's numerous references to the Book of Revelations and some of the prophecies in there. And actually, the narrator for the whole story is a pastor. At least that's the case in the book. I'm not sure if that was the same in the comic book or not. It's always an awkward mixing religion and comic books. I think comic book fans usually are not quite sure of what to make of it, of kind of too much religion in their comic books. And I think religious people aren't really quite sure what to make of it either. There's a school of thought, this may be some of the religious people I grew up with, who view everything as a culture war. So any kind of reference to the Bible or religion in sort of any secular medium, they view it as kind of a victory in the culture war. There's another group which just kind of views everything secular as evil, and that they would probably view it as blasphemy to have kind of the religion repeatedly referenced in a secular comic book. I don't know. There's also, I'm thinking of some of my friends in college or university now who are really into comic books and were a little bit, I think, too quick to claim that it was kind of high art because it was referencing themes of mythology or religion. And I think maybe there's something going on as well. This book maybe gets a little bit too highly praised for its religious symbolism or imagery. Take, for example, the character of Magog in Kingdom Come. It's a reference to the biblical characters of Gog and Magog. But that's about as that's about as deep as it gets. It's just kind of taking religious symbolism and scattering it out through the comic in an attempt to make it seem deeper than it actually is. Or at least that's my opinion. I don't know. Tell me I'm wrong. Let me know why you think this comic or this story is actually more deep than I'm giving it credit for. I didn't think it was all that deep, but I nonetheless found it a pleasant waste of time on the whole.